Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're playing Destiny 2. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, the future. Let's get to it. Now, in order to talk about the future, we have to actually talk about the past. Now, originally, way back in Destiny 1, the Vault of Glass was the only way to level up. That has evolved and changed over the years so that once you get to a certain point, you don't have to do the raid anymore. At one point you did, and now you don't. Back in Destiny 2 when it first came out, in the first year, you could get everything from the Eververse store just by playing the game. Once you level up and get the maximum level, you could get everything from the Eververse just by getting those bright engrams. Now, additionally, armor made a difference in terms of power, but that was about it. At the beginning of Destiny 2, there were no perks associated with armor, so it didn't really matter what armor you had and what was on the armor. Likewise, Destiny 1, armor was very similar. Now they've changed that around. Armor is important. The rolls that you have on it are important. There are 6 stat rolls, and each one does something different. The fact of the matter is that the game has changed over the years, and that is what we're going to talk about. The change that is not right now, but will be coming into the future. Now, in general, I think the seasonal model that they have currently is fairly well received. Now, unfortunately, the seasonal model also leaves out anyone that is not active on a weekly basis, as some things only occur for a short period of time, and if you're not there, you missed out. That being said, starting Season 12, next season, the history, what you experience within a season will be available for about a year, so for about 3 seasons beyond what season it came out. Now, it's not going to be the entire season's worth of content because some of the things that are in the season are going to be going away. So things like the Guardian games, that is only going to be available for a short period of time. Things like the obelisks, those are only going to be available during the season because they are very time sensitive and time intensive. It takes a long time to build up those obelisks, and so they don't want to have obelisks plus the bunkers at the same time, because then you're not really doing either one very well. You're doing a little bit here, you're doing a little bit there, or you're only focusing on one and not the other. However, the narrative will be available, and in general, they want to strike a balance between having content available for people coming in late to the party versus maintaining and bringing out new content. So they're going to have to decide what parts of each season they are going to retain for future seasons and for how long, how many more seasons, and what is going to be going away. Now, more than likely, anything that required a large time resource is going to go away. So like the obelisks, like the bunkers, upgrading the bunkers, that took a decent amount of time and effort. So there's not a real good reason to keep that going forward when that required a large time investment. Now, to a certain extent, I think this is a good idea because people that are coming in late to the party, they don't necessarily see the narrative. They don't necessarily see the steps that have been taken to get where we currently are. So you're kind of just thrown in there and you talk to someone and they say, go do this, but you don't necessarily know why they're asking you to do that. And since Destiny and Bungie is really good at storytelling when they're putting it out there, I think it's really great that they're going to be bringing that with all the players, not just with the people that are active and current with the game. Now, when Shadowkeep first launched, Bungie had said that each season's specific weapons would go away but would be coming back, and they hadn't detailed how that was going to be possible. So those weapons that you got from the Vex invasion, you can not earn those anymore, and there's no way to get them. Likewise, doing the sundial activity, you were able to get certain Saint 14 weapons, and that is not possible anymore. You cannot earn those weapons anymore. So what they're talking about now is taking those weapons, and of course with the activity moving forward, so the sundial you'll still be able to play in future seasons, or at least for a few seasons into the future. And then of course maybe you play some Crucible or Strikes or Gambit, and certain of those weapons will be dropped either on a weekly rotation or whatever. So you still have an avenue, not just from the specific activity that, maybe the active players aren't playing as much, so maybe it'll be more difficult to get a group while you're doing the sundial activity, but you'd still be able to do a strike or a crucible and still be able to get that weapon that you're pursuing. Now, one of the biggest gripes, and I completely agree, is that bounties have been too central, too mandatory in order to ignore. Back in Destiny 1, there were some bounties, but not to the extent that it has become in Destiny 2. Additionally, if you wanted to get a little bit of boost from the bounties, then you could pick them up, but it wasn't so central to your seasonal rank, to your power, like it is now. So they want to move away a little bit from that to make getting the boost to your seasonal rank, to your experience, but without having bounties be that central role. And they've admitted that there is a fine line between optimizing and something becoming mandatory. So this is something that they are going to continue to have to work on throughout the next year. Today, looking at different Guardians, if you see certain Guardians at a certain level, you know they've been grinding out a lot of bounties. And looking at those bounties, you also know that they are working with 3 characters versus only 1 character. So Guardians, players that are hyperactive or very active with 3 characters, are obviously going to be able to get to a higher seasonal rank, a higher power level on their artifact than players that only have 1 character, or that are only working, say, every other week. So not only are you missing out on some of the content that's only around for, maybe 1 week, and you're also losing out on those bounties and those weekly bounties that give you a good boost to your XP and seasonal rank. So in the future, they are taking things off of character specific and becoming account specific. So everyone has that availability to get the boost throughout the year. So if you have 1 character, or if you have 3 characters, you still have that ability to get the same amount of experience. Now this is going to be a very difficult balancing act, because they want people who have 3 characters to still feel like they can use 3 characters, but at the same time, people that are only using 1 character, they don't want to disadvantage those people. So I think it is going to be difficult for them to balance between players that are hyperactive and players that are more casual in order to give them the same boost on a weekly basis. Going along with this theme of triple character versus 1 character, or account specific versus character specific, we're talking about Eververse. Now, Eververse has been a boon and a bane for many players for a long time, ever since it was unveiled way back in Destiny 1. From only accepting premium currency to now accepting Bright Dust that you can earn. And of course, Bright Dust, you can earn more if you have 3 characters versus if you only have 1 character. And continuing with that, they are going to make ways that are account specific versus character specific. So when you're earning Bright Dust as a single character account, you'll be able to earn more Bright Dust versus someone that's using 3 characters. And again, this is great for players that either don't have time or don't want to have 3 characters. If they want to use only the 1 character, they can still earn as much Bright Dust, they can earn as much XP as players that have 3 characters. Now, of course, if you're more active in the Destiny universe, I'm going to assume that you'll be able to earn more Bright Dust depending on how much you want to grind. Now, hopefully, they will change. In addition to this, they'll also change the bounties that only reward 10 Bright Dust. You can only have 5 of those bounties at a time, and you're only getting 50 Bright Dust by finishing those 5, and then you have to go back and get some more. So one of the things they're going to do is make it some way that you can get the bounties from the director versus going to the tower versus going to the moon or wherever to pick up those bounties. So that is one way to make it a little bit easier to move around, especially with loading screens. If you're having to wait 30 seconds to get into an area, and then you have to go run over or take your sparrow over to a character NPC, pick up those bounties, and then you go back to orbit or you go to your destination that you had intended. You know, a couple minutes later, all of a sudden, a couple minutes turns into a couple hours. So I think that snowballs, and I think it's a good idea to be able to at least pick up those bounties quickly versus having to go physically to each location to pick them up. Now, one of the changes that are coming to the Destiny 2 universe is a transmog system. So any piece of armor that you get will eventually become an ornament that you can put on any other piece of armor. So instead of having a hodgepodge of different types of armor and looking like a mess, or relying on Eververse to get those ornaments or the season pass, every and any armor that you pick up will be able to become an ornament. Now, they have not detailed how this will work in practice, but they said it will be either through silver or in-game effort. Now, obviously, silver will be the way to instantly get that ornament, but how much and how often that you can do that with silver is going to be a factor. In-game effort could be anything, and anyone that had to level up their weapon in Destiny 1 in order to unlock those perks should be leery of the in-game effort part of the armor to armor ornament progress. So does that mean that you will have to wear some garbage stat armor in order to turn it into a universal ornament over the course of 1 or 2 weeks in order to do that? Will you have to wear it and thus gain XP by doing different activities and then finally being able to break it down into ornaments, or earning the ornament separately and then breaking down the armor and then get the armor that you want to wear because it has good stats? I mean, I would expect something along those lines to happen, and they've not detailed exactly what's going to happen, and I wouldn't expect to hear exact details until it actually happens sometime next year. And it looks like there's going to be a lot of changes coming to Eververse. All the legendary ornaments are no longer going to be sold by Eververse. Things like sparrows, ghosts, and ships will no longer be sold by Eververse. Now, that does not include the current season. Everything that has been sold currently or previously from Eververse will still be through Eververse. However, in the future, sometime during year 4, they're going to change this. Now, in addition, these bright engrams that we would get would be from long, long ago. So if you were not around for that time, then it's great, but if you had been around and you had gotten everything, it really didn't make a lot of sense. So what they're going to be doing is updating it with each season so that the Eververse can have those bright engrams from 3 seasons or more from before. So next season, let's say if they were rolling it out, which they aren't, if they were rolling it out next season, that season would not have the current season nor the previous season, but it would have the season of Undying, which was at the beginning of year 3 for Destiny. So the season of the Worthy, the season of Dawn would not be included in the bright engrams, but the season of Undying would. And of course, everything beyond that, season of Opulence, etc. So every season brings in a new season, but nothing current. So if there is something in the season currently that you want, then you know that you should get it. If you're kind of hemming and hawing, or you're not really crazy about it, you can wait a few seasons and then you might be able to get it from a bright engram down the road. I don't think it's the perfect solution, but I think it's pretty darn good. I thought that Eververse in the beginning, it was nice, but ultimately it was too generous, and then they moved to a model where it was very stingy, and now they're kind of trying to strike a balance between the two, where Eververse is still important, and if you're spending your silver, you know that what you're getting is time sensitive. If you want that emote or ornament, exotic ornament or whatever, then get it now. But it may be available. You might randomly get it from a bright engram in another 3 seasons. So if you want it right now, go spend that silver. If you don't want it, you might be able to get it down the road. Now finally, we're going to talk about rewards in Destiny 2. Now ever since Destiny 1 and continuing today, the reason for playing is to get those weapons, get the armor, get whatever is associated with the activity that you're playing. So whether you're playing Gambit, Strikes, or Raid, or Trials, the reason for playing maybe is to see how good or how fast you can do something, but more importantly, it is looking for that drop, whether it is a god roll piece of armor, god roll weapon, whatever. That is the reason to do it, and that is why that needs an update. So going all the way back to Atheon, playing that first raid was the only way to get a legendary ship. So if you wanted a different ship than what was available, you had to play the raid. So those ghost shells, ships, sparrows, and legendary ornaments, both weapons and armor, are coming off eventually Eververse and going into aspirational content. So for example, the legendary lost sectors would have a chance of dropping, say, an ornament or maybe a ghost shell or a sparrow or a ship. No, probably not all 4. So each activity, whether it is a Nightfall or a Strike or Gambit or Crucible or a Raid or Trials or a dungeon, they will have some type of accessory. So not only will you get power out of it, not only will you get items out of it, but you'll have some sort of accessory, either, like I said, an ornament, a ghost, a sparrow, a ship, some sort of vanity item that can only be gotten through that activity. So this will drive home the reason to do those activities, whether it is a raid or trials or dungeons, etc. Now, if you're a longtime veteran of Destiny and some of this sounds familiar, well, it's because it is. Some of these things had been around and then were taken away or deprecated, whatever you want to call it, and then they're going to make their rounds again. All the Destiny 1 raids had some sort of ship that you could earn only from the boss, and it was a very rare drop, so you might have gotten it if you did 5 or 10 raids, similar to how the exotics drop from those raids today. So that is going to be making a return trip where you get a ghost shell or you get a sparrow or you get a ship by doing the raid, and maybe you see someone with a particular ship and you say, oh, that looks cool, how'd you get it? Well, I got it from Trials, I got it from Raid, I got it from the dungeon. And you say, oh, well, maybe I'll have to go and do that a few more times to try and get it. So all these changes that are coming, they're trying to get the players more engaged, whether you have 3 characters or 1 character, and have a reason to do certain activities over and over again, not simply because that's the activity that drops Ascendant Shards, or that's the activity that gives you the glowing armor or a particular type of weapon, but because you have a chance of getting a vanity item as well. And that is all fine and dandy, but is it too little too late? Have they already disenfranchised a large chunk of the base of Destiny 2 players that say, no, I'm not going to come back for that. You did that before and then you got rid of it. What's to say you're not going to do that again? You're going to have this for a certain amount of time and then you're going to change it again and get rid of it down the road again and say, you know what, we're going to have all this vanity items only from Eververse, and that's the only place you're going to get it. Honestly, there's nothing saying that's not going to happen in the future, other than where the players are most engaged. So if you are playing, if you're not playing, and what you're doing while you're playing. Now, one last point I want to mention, just because Bungie hadn't mentioned it, there are way too many bounties, which they have talked about. There are a lot of bounties, but there are a lot of bounties that require individual effort, even with match-made activities. So there are Crucible bounties or Gambit bounties or Strike bounties where you, as a player, have to get the final blow, whether it is a precision final blow or a grenade or a rocket or sword or whatever. These types of bounties do not enhance the activity. They do not enhance the feeling of community because you feel like you have to rush in to get those kills before someone else gets them. If I can go through and get those kills and get it done in 1 strike or 2 strikes, that's better than playing as a team and having to do 3 or 4 strikes. So I would like to see those bounties changed in the future where you don't have to be the one to get the final blow. Maybe your teammates, whether you're on a strike or on the Crucible, it counts for a percentage of a kill, or maybe even be a little bit generous and count it as a full kill. This would go a long way towards feeling like a team rather than feeling like an individual on a team with your own agenda. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check us out on social media, and thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And we'll see you next time.